Where is the baby I entrusted? As soon as I bumped into her at a department store, my sister-in-law grabbed me. She rants hysterically. She put the baby in the delivery box. Take care of babysitting my child properly. I didn't understand the meaning and was stunned, but my sister-in-law told me the same thing over and over again and went somewhere. No way. Flustered, I hurried back home, realizing that something was amiss, and opened the delivery box. But the baby is nowhere to be found, and no matter where I look, I can't find it. And the sister-in-law had irreparable consequences for her actions. I was a career woman who worked hard, but when I got married at the age of 31, I retired. It has been 2 years since I became a full-time housewife, but I have not yet had a child with my husband of the same age, and I was enjoying the life of two couples. However, there is one thing that worries me. My husband has a brother who is 4 years older than him and has a serious and quiet personality. As it turns out, my husband's brother and I used to be colleagues, and we actually met before I met my husband. Through that connection, my husband and I started dating and became husband and wife. And my brother-in-law also got married 6 months later. Due to the circumstances of their pregnancy, they swiftly moved forward with our relationship and married. However, Catherine, whom he met through his boss, was a flamboyant and bold woman, and I found myself overwhelmed by her personality. From the first time we met at the meeting, she didn't seem to like my simple blouse. Isn't that a loungewear? Isn't it a little too plain? She deliberately said it in a loud voice and then snickered. It's certainly not formal, but I was very embarrassed because I thought I was careful not to be rude. And when my father-in-law's birthday celebration was held at my parents-in-law's house, my sister-in-law's selfishness was unbelievable. The taste is too strong for pregnant women. I couldn't believe it when she frowned and disparaged the food my mother-in-law had made. My sister-in-law, who lacked awareness of the situation, seemed oblivious to the fact that the main guest of the party was our father-in-law. Could you get me some sushi from the station? My brother-in-law didn't seem to be paying attention, and my parents-in-law seemed to be paying attention to my sister-in-law, thinking that her food preferences would change during pregnancy. However, she's pregnant. Worried, I couldn't help but interject. Is raw food okay at this time of year? Then, what came back from my sister-in-law were words that I had not expected. Huh? I don't need advice from a half-baked woman who's never been pregnant. I was so taken aback that I couldn't say anything back, but there was a question swirling in my mind all the time. Why did that quiet brother-in-law of mine marry someone like her? It seems my husband shared the same sentiment. When we returned home, he had a worried expression as he said, "I wonder if my brother's all right. Catherine won't stay the same even after the baby's born, will she?" However, my husband's worries were correct. My sister-in-law prioritized her own fashion over taking care of her newborn baby, and neither her long nails nor her tight perfume had changed since she was pregnant. Moreover, not even a month after giving birth, she would hand the baby over to my brother-in-law when he returned from work, claiming she was going to aesthetic treatments, nail salons, or girls' nights out. It seems my in-laws couldn't bear it anymore and tried to talk to her about it once, but just once. I've been babysitting all day, so it's only natural that my husband will see it when I come back. It seems my father-in-law tried to reason with her, saying, "There's a limit to everything. It's not okay to go out every day like this," but she didn't listen. Isn't it allowed to release the stress of childcare? My sister-in-law just got defensive, and with my overwhelmed father-in-law looking on in silence, she triumphantly directed her words at my brother-in-law. "You agree, don't you? A wife should always look her best, right?" My husband told me that there had been such an exchange, and I was really glad that I wasn't there. Around that time, my mother fell ill and was hospitalized, so I had other things on my mind. I didn't want to feel any extra stress, so after hearing about it, I tried to keep my distance as much as possible. However, when the baby was 6 months old, my sister-in-law began to visit our apartment. At that time, I had just lost my mother, who was in the hospital, and I was in deep grief. However, my sister-in-law doesn't care about that. "Miranda, you're always cooped up at home, like you have nothing better to do." Saying that, he began to leave the baby with me and go out. Certainly, that little presence can be soothing, but as someone without experience in childcare, it was overwhelming for me to take care of them alone. However, no matter how much I complain about my anxiety, my sister-in-law does not listen. The frequency of coming to our house gradually increased, from once a week to twice, and finally to leave the baby every other day. My husband, who heard the story from me, also said, "I can't be responsible if something happens," so I consulted with my brother-in-law. However, my brother-in-law was also exhausted from work and babysitting, and he didn't seem to have the energy to persuade his wife. My brother should put his foot down more firmly. "I'm sorry, Miranda." My husband also seemed unusually frustrated with his brother, and being close siblings, I couldn't help but feel anxious as well. In the meantime, I went to a department store alone to change my mood for the first time in a long time. "Miranda." I was stopped from behind by a familiar voice. When I turned around, my sister-in-law with a scared face approached me. "Where is the baby I entrusted?" "What?" "I don't know." Suddenly, I was yelled at point-blank range, and when I was confused, my sister-in-law yelled hysterically. "You were supposed to put it in the delivery box." "Miranda, why are you here?" "What? You mean you left the baby?" It is true that the apartment where I live has its own delivery box for each room, but I felt incredulous at the impossible situation. But my sister-in-law keeps glaring at me and yelling, and I don't think she's joking. "I've got an errand to run, so go home early and babysit." Sounds good, right? When she gave the order, she ran away to the man who seemed to be her companion. I saw her off in a daze, but I was worried about the baby, so I hurried home. When I arrived at the apartment, I opened the delivery box next to the entrance, but it was empty. I looked around but didn't see the baby. I stood there at a loss. Then, the breathless building manager rushed over, saying, "Where were you? I called you." Apparently, he noticed me when I got home and chased me. It was just right. "Don't you know the baby?" While trying to calm me down, the building manager briefly explained the situation. "About 2 hours ago, a resident who lived on the same floor as me called me and said, 'I can hear a baby crying from the hallway.' Afterwards, the building manager discovered the baby inside our delivery box and immediately contacted the police. The baby was taken to the hospital by ambulance," he said. When I looked at my phone, I saw that the manager had called me many times, but I hadn't noticed it because I had left it in silent mode when I got on the train. I rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, the baby was reported early, so there was no problem with his health. However, my relief was short-lived, and I was interviewed by the police. I really didn't know the baby was in the delivery box. I tried my best to explain that my sister-in-law had left her child without permission. The interrogators seemed to feel uncomfortable that I had bothered to choose a box in front of my house as a place to put the baby, and my suspicions were cleared for the time being. During that time, the police called my sister-in-law many times, but she couldn't connect, and my brother-in-law, who was finally able to contact me, rushed to pick up the baby. Miranda, I'm really sorry. She didn't even pick up my calls. What's he thinking? My brother-in-law, unusually raising his voice but looking utterly perplexed. What are you going to do with your baby? Can you take time off work? My brother-in-law was a section manager at a major company, so I knew he couldn't take a break easily. For now, they said they'll take care of him at my parents' place. That's a relief, then. I'm really sorry for getting you involved in this mess. I couldn't help but feel sorry for my brother-in-law, who apologized to me. That night, when I told my husband about the situation when he came home from work, he was furious that the police were involved. What the hell is she up to? This is unbelievable. My husband told me that, and I finally calmly understood the position I was in. I was a suspect even for a moment. I will never forgive you. Feeling boiling anger inside, I made a resolution to take matters into my own hands and deliver some consequences. The next day, the police informed me that they had confirmed that my sister-in-law was putting the baby in the security cameras on each floor of the apartment. Apparently, the sister-in-law followed the other residents who had returned from an outing and passed through the autolock door in the entrance hall. The police officer seemed to be stunned, saying, "No, I was surprised that it was quite malicious." I submitted the records I had kept documenting instances where my sister-in-law had been neglecting childcare as evidence. Then, on the night of 5 days after my sister-in-law disappeared, my brother-in-law called my husband. "Catherine is back." When we heard that, we hurried to my brother-in-law's house. My sister-in-law showed no remorse and instead adopted a defiant attitude. "What are you here for? I'm advising you for your own good. You should pick it up when the police call." My sister-in-law's eyes darted nervously, and it seemed like she finally grasped the gravity of the situation. "Huh? Police? Wasn't that from you?" "Unfortunately, no." Upon realizing the ignored calls were from the police, my sister-in-law started to lash out in anger. "You're the one who goes out all the time, so it's your fault. I thought you were avoiding them." Then, my brother-in-law, who had never been angry before, yelled at her. "Catherine! Cut it out. Sneaking into the apartment like that, don't you have any shame?" "What? There's no need to get so angry." Perhaps shocked by being scolded for the first time, my sister-in-law looked away and mumbled something under her breath. "But even if you thought I was avoiding them, leaving the baby with me without telling me is just cruel as a mother, don't you think?" "Oh, that's because I had an errand. I was so busy that I accidentally forgot. I'm not as idle as you are." I couldn't bring myself to entertain any more nonsensical excuses, so I decided to expose another one of her wrongdoings. "Catherine, you're cheating on him, aren't you?" "Huh? What are you talking about? Don't make stuff up." My sister-in-law seemed intent on denying it, but it was an untenable position. In fact, I knew a man who was with my sister-in-law in a department store. The man was the manager of the company I retired from when I got married. In other words, he was my brother-in-law's boss. However, from his perspective, he wouldn't have remembered just a regular employee who left a different department 2 years ago. That's nonsense. Despite my sister-in-law's earnest pleas, my brother-in-law remained silent, offering no response. "It's too late," I reported it to my brother-in-law. "If you're going to say that, do you have any proof? You're just bluffing, aren't you?" Here, I showed my sister-in-law a picture of my smartphone. There was a picture capturing the moment when my sister-in-law and her affair partner, the department head, walked out of a hotel arm in arm. This was something I managed to obtain by reaching out to my former colleague as a last resort, and fortunately, it paid off. It turned out that the relationship between the two was a well-known story in the company, and there were many witnesses. My colleague was intrigued, saying, "That manager doesn't like me," and called out to other colleagues. And from one of them, I got conclusive evidence. Are you still going to call me a liar? Oh, this hotel. That day. Yes, that day. You'll admit it, won't you? The photo was taken 5 days ago, and the two were dressed in the same outfit as when they met at the department store. After yelling at me, my sister-in-law and her affair partner headed to a dubious hotel. By chance, a colleague at the company saw it and took a picture of it. Confronted with undeniable evidence, my sister-in-law fell silent for a moment, but then immediately became defiant and started speaking with disdain. It seems the relationship between the department head and my sister-in-law started before my brother-in-law entered the picture, and according to him, he was told by the department head that he couldn't divorce his wife. Despite that, they continued their relationship, and my sister-in-law, who had passed the marriageable age, begged the department head for marriage. I don't want to struggle with money in the future, so introduce me to a marriage partner with a high income. In response to her request, the department head had actually introduced my quiet but capable and well-earning brother-in-law to her. In other words, my brother-in-law was being pushed into a marriage arrangement that suited the convenience of both my sister-in-law and the department head. Then, my husband, who had been silently entrusting me with the pursuit of my sister-in-law, opened his mouth. Hey! The baby's father is like my brother, isn't he? My husband seems to have heard it involuntarily. Oh, I don't even know that. It was something he didn't want to hear. My sister-in-law, flustered but determined, blurted it out and avoided meeting my brother-in-law's gaze. However, my brother-in-law didn't say anything about it, and he confronted her with divorce papers. Catherine, fill this out. My part's already written down. My sister-in-law started crying, probably because she didn't expect my brother-in-law to ask for a divorce even if she did this. And no way. I'm not breaking up with him. Don't kid yourself, you're just going to do whatever you want with my money. Terrified by my brother-in-law's forceful demeanor, my sister-in-law clung to me for support. Miranda, it's better for babies to have mothers, right? If it's the same woman, you know, right? No, I've never been pregnant. I'm just a half-baked woman, so I wouldn't know. No. Excuse me. It's... As expected, my sister-in-law seemed to realize that these were the words she had spat out on me before. But I can say this much. Mothers who treat their children like objects are not needed. When I said that, she couldn't seem to say anything back. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She shrugged my shoulders. After that, the divorce of the brothers-in-law was successfully finalized. He demanded $2 million each from my sister-in-law and the director of the cheating partner. I heard that this uproar became known to the president of the company where the general manager worked, and he resigned because it became difficult for him to stay. My sister-in-law was accused of failing to fulfill her protective responsibilities and fell into a world where she would never be allowed to enjoy fashion again. My brother-in-law, with my husband's encouragement, decided to officially take custody of the baby. They also conducted a DNA test, which proved the child was indeed his, and he cried tears of relief. Now that he is on childcare leave, he is struggling to raise his child with the cooperation of us and his parents. On the other hand, I found out that I was pregnant a few days ago. As I gently stroked my still inconspicuous belly, I felt the responsibility and joy of becoming a parent,